Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, editor-in-chief of Supply Chain Brain. I want to welcome you to this fourth episode in a six-part series on creating resilient supply chains through IT innovation, presented by Deloitte Consulting. The topic today is supply chain resilience and risk management, a top post-pandemic priority. Quick reminder, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, in 2020, a cascade of disruptive events shifted strategic supply chain priorities. Challenges cited in a recent survey of chief procurement officers included supplier bankruptcies, increased transportation requirements, and major quality issues threatening both brand reputation and product visibility. Today, we're going to discuss how a focus on supply chain resilience can minimize lost sales, reduce operating costs, enhance brand reputation and trust, foster strong supplier partnerships, and optimize inventories. With that, I want to introduce our speaker for today. Vijay Natarajan is Managing Director of Supply Chain Network Operations at Deloitte, LLC. He's a senior management executive with more than 20 years of global experience in the automotive, industrial, consumer products, and healthcare industries. Vijay is especially skilled at driving business turnarounds and crafting strategies that generate transformational and sustainable gains in earnings. He's a cross-functional leader who's adept in a wide range of supply chain operations and strategies. So with that, I want to pass it off to Vijay Natarajan. Vijay, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. So I want to start off with this slide that really talks about a transformative era of supply chains that we are in. Companies continue to face different forms of crisis, as you may have seen over the last couple of years, and global supply chains continue to resynchronize and evolve and get to the next normal. We've heard of geopolitical tensions like the Ukraine war, inflation and material price increases that have come upon us recently, commodity shortages like lithium, cobalt, nickel, pandemic, labor shortages, cybersecurity, climate, infrastructure constraints, and it's all in front of you here. It's really putting a significant level of pressure on global supply chains. So let's talk about how do we then deal with this challenge. In the past, supply chains typically have been focused on efficiency and cost, but no longer can companies ignore the fact that they will need resilience and agility to really address this cascade of risks that keep coming at them day in and day out. So let's talk about one example of many that you see on the left here that I was personally involved with. And if you look at the one third from the bottom, the chip crisis that really hit the automotive industry paralyzed them significantly to the tune of billions of dollars in revenue losses, significant expedited costs, customer and brand image that was affected. And so companies had to look past efficiency, in addition to efficiency, I should say, at operational resilience and operational agility. So what are these two additional elements? Operational resilience is really a supply chain's ability to absorb, respond, and recover back to an existing state after a supplier demand shock, right? And operational agility is the supply chain's ability to evolve quickly and profitably, especially relative to competitors, in response to a fundamental shift in supplier demand. So when you think about this, a good example of resilience can be demonstrated through tactical efforts that we've seen, like stockpiling, drop-in replacements, alternate sources, so that you can quickly respond to a risk. It's a little bit reactive, right? Agility is putting structural changes into your planning, sourcing, procurement, and engineering and R&D processes to be able to respond to supply chain shocks. So one of the biggest reasons when you think about supply chain disruptions is this rapidly evolving ecosystems where new risks are frequently emerging, coupled with high complex supply chains that increases this risk of disruption. So when we surveyed a number of organizations across the board, 83% of them experienced a supplier-related incident, and 46% of them had a moderate to severe impact. And when you think about supplier incidents that have affected quality of service to customers, business continuity, financial position, reputation, and as well as impacted regulatory compliance, understanding your not only a tier one supplier, but your end tiers, sub tiers is extremely critical to addressing supply chain disruption. We conducted a CPO survey in 2021 to really understand the shifting supply chain priorities that have been brought on by these disruptive events. So clearly, we've talked about supply assurance has been a key challenge. But what we're also seeing that when you look to the right side of the slide is high performers invest more in risk management. High performers are significantly investing in advanced technologies. They are making risk as a core aspect during supplier selection and sourcing. And then they're measuring supply chain transparency and asking suppliers to provide their end-tier bill of material, their end-tier suppliers, and identifying potential high-risk components in them in advance. And so we're seeing because of these capabilities put in place, 95% are more likely to have high visibility into tier one suppliers and twice as likely into tier two plus. So when we think about, what capabilities they are putting in place, it's really enhanced supplier information, supplier collaboration, and alternative sources of supply so that they can quickly be resilient and agile. And then we also found that over 50% of the organizations are not investing in SRM tools like supplier collaboration. And so that is the need of the hour as we go forward. So what are the benefits and challenges? So while supply chain resilience offers substantial business value, there are numerous barriers as well. So when we look on the left side, we've seen the holistic supply chain resilience will minimize lost sales, will minimize cost impacts that are driven through expedited freight and premium freight. It'll enhance brand and trust, and then ultimately enhance your sourcing and planning and inventory processes as well. So as we think about the right side and the challenges, it's not easy. A CPO survey that we conducted, 70% visibility to tier ones, 26% are confidently able to predict tier one risks, and only 15% have tier two visibility. So that's a significant shortcoming. Second, lack of functional interconnectedness across design, sourcing, and planning have prevented companies from having structural capabilities to be resilient and agile in their ability to respond to shocks. And then last but not least, there is no technical infrastructure to facilitate visibility and collaboration with extended networks far beyond tier one. So in order to address or deliver the benefits of resilience and agility, these challenges definitely have to be overcome as we move forward.
Moldino is an enterprise-level solutions provider that specializes in providing full visibility across the supply chain of Fortune 500 partners worldwide. By implementing IoT sensors and accessing collected data via the online dashboard, OEMs can be notified of the real-time production status of their outsourced manufacturing sites. This means being assured of on-time products delivery, fully meeting market demand levels, and realizing enhanced asset management. Learn more by booking a demo at www.emoldino.com. InterSystems is the leading provider of next-generation solutions for enterprise digital transformations in the manufacturing, retail, consumer goods, logistics, distribution, financial services, and healthcare sectors. Organizations depend on InterSystems' Iris data platform to integrate and complement their existing supply chain applications and IT infrastructure to provide real-time, intelligent, and actionable insights into supply chain disruptions and accelerate time to value. InterSystems' cloud-first data platforms solve interoperability, speed, and scalability problems for large organizations around the globe. For more information on the InterSystems Iris data platform, visit www.intersystems.com/supply chain.
Okay. So next I wanted to move and share some insights from benchmarking we conducted, where we interviewed, really did a 360-degree interview, right? We talked to the companies that were affected by the supply chain disruption. We talked to their competitors across industries, including some leaders like high-tech companies. We talked to tier 1 suppliers and we talked to tier 2 suppliers. And we found that an integrated approach to supply chain resilience comprised of 4 key elements here. And then below at the bottom of the page, we also identified the best-in-class capabilities that were demonstrated. So let's talk about these 4. One is crisis management. And I'll say, a great example of this is when I helped an OEM think through how do they manage the crisis around semiconductor chips, right? And really, it consisted of putting together a cross-functional team that rolled out a number of in parallel risk mitigation strategies, working collaboratively with their supply base. So the key aspect here is, how do you govern it? What is the team composition and what's the org structure that will provide you the multi-network visibility quickly, help you with real-time risk monitoring, quickly analyze the impact of the risk, and then create a rapid response in response to a particular crisis. Number 2, planning actions. What production or supplier planning activities were employed to drive assurance going forward? We came across companies that were working with their suppliers to understand if the capacity is aligned with the forecasts in the longer term. We saw that they were sharing end-tier operational visibility in terms of forecast versus supply commits so that they could proactively identify mismatches. They were continuously collaborating and working on mix management and driving a lot of the parts that were being supplied to higher profit vehicles. And they were continuously optimizing planning and production. Third, we looked at commercial and supply chain actions. What was the approach to supplier selection and contracting? What this involved is rapid commercial measures, sourcing for long-term supply assurance, and then also, not done in the past, but recently, companies have started looking at longer-term service agreements, not only with the tier 1s, but their sub-tiers as well, especially the ones that were of significant risk or were choke points in the supply chain, if you will. And then number 4, product design actions. What design-centric solutions were employed for supply assurance? We looked at companies capturing the sub-tier bombs, identifying which parts were high risk, identifying alternate parts and pre-qualifying parts and suppliers so that they could quickly switch. We were looking at driving software-driven changes to application versus only relying on hardware. They started co-designing directly, for example, with chips in terms of the families and standardizing designs, and you could extend this to any commodity, if you will. And then cycle plan and complexity reduction collaboration were also key aspects of capabilities demonstrated. So as you can see, this is a highly complex, resilience and agility related capabilities and requires a very cross-functional and well-governed and orchestrated effort. So as we think about approach, the end-to-end supply chain resilience is comprised of three core elements. You've got the illuminate and map, sense and decide, and collaborate and act. And to this end, before I dive into each one of these, I want to say companies are investing in technological platforms that intelligently sense risk real time, illuminate and map supply networks, and assist in mitigating risks very proactively. So let's talk about each of these elements. The first, supply network illumination and mapping. Here, we illuminate supply networks using hundreds and thousands of data sources, work with the sub-tier suppliers to map specific supply chains, validating it with the extended network. And we see companies investing millions in digitizing this intelligence so that they could flex very quickly should risks arise. Second is risk sense and decide. Risk screening of suppliers, whether it's financial, operational, security, labor, geopolitical, regulatory, using over 300,000 data sources has become almost real time. We highlight category, supplier, and event-related risks and layer in analytics very quickly to conduct scenario modeling to understand the impact, prioritize risks, and drive mitigation efforts very quickly. And then the third element is collaboration. Here we drive visibility to forecasts, supply operations, and constraints so that we can proactively address them. The collaboration platform allows sharing of this data with sub-tiers and orchestration of a collaborative response as risks surface. So as we think about the supply risk management framework, we need to really think about a comprehensive set of risks needed to be tracked and analyzed real time to reduce time to resolution. So when you think about risk, they fall in sort of three categories. There is internal, operational, and functional risks. And this typically takes the form of poor product performance, poor forecast, systems outage, IP theft, cyber attack, unplanned downtime, fire, strike, regulatory compliance, and the like. Second is the extended supply network risks. And this could be supplier bankruptcy, shutdowns, shortages, quality, cost increase, and the like. And then the last one, which everyone is familiar with, is the macro environment risks. And you see them listed below. I won't go through all of them, but like the pandemic, natural disasters are a couple that come to the top because we've recently witnessed them. I mean, a great example is the recent earthquake in Turkey. So as we think about capabilities for resilience and agility, you really have to think about a transformational journey that you need to map out, consisting of several capability blocks. And broadly, they're categorized in two big buckets, if you will. The first bucket is all the tactical capabilities that is going to be required that are deployed immediately. And then in parallel, structural improvements also need to be deployed. So the tactical ones are sort of in the dark gray, the structural ones are in light blue, as you can see. And then in addition, key enablers around technology platform and infrastructure, operating model, multi-tier, communications and change management, metrics tracking, and training are going to be required to really get the organization to a leading capability level. Diving a little bit into each of these blocks here. So the tactical ones start with eliminating and mapping, and we talked about that with the three core pillars. It's the first pillar that I just covered. So this really thinks about making sure you digitize kind of the multi-tier supplier network and eliminating it, value stream mapping it and confirming your specific supply chain and the tiers suppliers for your highest risk commodities, and then understanding where the choke points are. Sensing and deciding is continuous risk sensing that is real time, and then quickly triaging your network elimination and the risk and overlaying the two to understand what the impact is to your products, to your customers, to your plants, to your suppliers, and then creating a risk portfolio that you continuously review and prioritize as you execute mitigation. And then crisis management is really the ability to look at a risk, prioritize it, and then quickly compress the time it takes from identification to resolution. This really is capabilities around risk mitigation management that really brings those cross-functional disciplines I talked about to bear, and then implementing a response collaboratively with your suppliers, mostly enabled by a technology platform. When you go into the structural elements, let's start with design for assurance. Here you want to take the highest critical commodities, if you will, high-risk commodities, and ensure you have a category strategy and you have strategic suppliers identified that you can collaborate with very early in the design and development cycle, including technology and cycle plan collaboration as you look across the portfolio that you're deploying over the coming months and years. In addition, you've got an understanding of the entire BOM, understanding of the most critical high-risk components in there, the suppliers that provide them, and then pre-qualifying alternate suppliers, alternate parts, so that you're not caught in a situation where you can't quickly switch should a risk arise. And so the design for assurance takes on a meaning where all of this multi-tier BOM and N-tier supplier and value stream maps are digitized, and that intelligence is really used to drive risk mitigation in the future. Then you've got the sourcing and planning for assurance, where you are looking at capacity alignment, not only with their tier ones, but the choke points in the sub-tiers, and ensuring that there is capacity committed to the forecasts over the next few years. Sourcing for assurance is taken on a new meaning where you now get into long-term service agreements with the sub-tiers. You also ensure that your selection process has risk as a key component in addition to cost and performance. And then the planning and optimization is set up in a way that allows you to share forecasts not only with the tier one suppliers, but with your sub-tiers, wherein you can then proactively get that operational visibility, get that visibility to forecast and supply mismatches, and proactively address them with your suppliers. And then the last aspect is collaborate and act, where supplier operational visibility, multi-tier supplier collaboration, and risk mitigation governance is all orchestrated with these suppliers being on the same technology platform as you, where you are building that trust to exchange this kind of information, and then ensuring that you have the checks and balances and the agreements in place to be able to collaborate with your suppliers and execute mitigation actions real time.
With an average time to value of just 14 days, Overhaul is the only data-agnostic supply chain visibility and security solution. Empower your supply chain logistics with data-driven visibility and turn the aerial view into action with risk management insights that you can act on. Overhaul provides a comprehensive supply software as a service solution that gives you visibility, risk, compliance management, and insurance solutions all in one place. Move beyond visibility with Overhaul. Find out more at over-haul.com. And join us for the 5th episode in this 6-part series on creating resilient supply chains through IT innovation, presented by Deloitte Consulting. The topic next time will be strategic supplier management, the balance between breadth and depth. The speaker will be Milton Jones, Senior Manager, Supply Chain Network Operations at Deloitte Consulting, LLP. It goes live on April 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern. See you there.
So I just covered what I would call a broad set of capabilities, both tactical and structural. Next, I want to cover sort of technology enablement as well as the organization talent skills required. Starting with technology, an entire risk sensing platform that uses open source, machine learning, and augmented intelligence to eliminate supply networks, identify, analyze, and track risks are absolutely something that companies that are leaders in the space they are deploying. So the value that is enabled, we talked a little bit about this, but I want to quickly cover it. Network visibility, understanding the multi-tier supply network, sensing distress, continuously looking at risks, triaging and analyzing the impact very quickly, where most companies kind of struggle because they get all the alerts, but they don't know what to do with them. So the ability to put the first and second element together to then analyze the impact so that they can deploy the resources efficiently is going to be important. And monitoring supplier and category risks. So not only immediate sort of risks that are related to supplier issues, but also longer term category risks that may surface in the future. For example, cobalt, nickel, and lithium are going to be scarce commodities in the future. So as, let's say, the auto companies are moving towards electrification of their portfolio, they're going to be concerned about what are the sources of supply for those commodities and how do I protect myself? And you'll see examples like Tesla going and securing capacity, working directly with the mines. So really this longer term category risk view is going to be important. And I wanted to highlight that. And then collaborating and sharing on this platform. So what you see on the right is some examples of real-time dashboards that allow these companies to quickly look at what they have and then drive a lot of this mitigation actions real time. Then the organization structure is also very critical. So in addition to your category strategy, and this is an example for an automotive and industrial products client, you've got this supply chain risk organization that is being orchestrated and deployed. This particular organization looks at resiliency, risk, and sustainability, supply chain business planning, supply chain resiliency, social responsibility, and sustainability, strategy, governance, and partnerships. And they also have created a category commodity resilience group that closely ties with the category strategy group so that not only the sourcing aspects are considered, but the risk aspects are considered in conjunction. And then they're also deploying sort of regional aspects to work with this globally centralized corporate organization, and skills and talent in terms of not only sourcing, but category strategy are being deployed so that risk is considered very early in the development cycle. So I want to end with what end-to-end integrated supply chain resilience means. The takeaway here is you've got to activate, automate, and embed. You want to activate and triage network intelligence risk sensing to analyze the risk impact very quickly, which includes the key elements that I just talked about around supply elimination, the risk, putting those two together, conducting the triage analytics, and understanding the impact. You want to then automate a lot of this on a technology platform to drive more proactive risk mitigation efforts. And this really comes from AI, ML-driven predictive risk, and then connecting it to your ERP and planning systems, as well as supplier operational visibility, and putting all those elements together to drive real-time and proactive risk mitigation. And then the last piece is around embedding tactical and structural capabilities that I just covered, enabled by a supply chain risk organization, crisis management teams that are cross-functional, category experts, and then case management and execution where you've built some learning in terms of how you resolve some of these risks, and that drives more efficiency in the long run. And then in terms of the structural capabilities, you really want to think about design, sourcing, and planning, along with working with your suppliers in the longer term to embed these capabilities and be resilient and agile, in addition to being efficient in the future.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that great presentation, Vijay. At this point, let's move into the audience question and answer portion of our presentation. Now, we have quite a few audience questions already. It's a very active audience today.
Good.
However, we do encourage the audience to continue to submit questions, even as we are answering the ones we already have, and we will get to as many as we can. So let's start here with one here for you, Vijay. We've seen a number of supply chain disruptions in the recent past, the COVID pandemic, Suez Canal blockade, Ukraine war, and so many more. Why were traditional supply chains unprepared to respond to these disruptions?
Yeah. It's really 4 elements, right? The CPO survey that we conducted showed us that there's only 70% visibility into tier ones, 26% can confidently predict tier 1 risks, and 15% have tier 2 visibility. So lack of supply network visibility was number 1. Number 2 was companies have improved their visibility to risk events, but lack the analytical capability to quickly determine the impact to their supply chain plans and products. And lack of functional interconnectedness across design, sourcing, and planning, because traditionally these functions worked in silos. It resulted in a very slow response to risk events. Lack of necessary governance, people, process to facilitate a holistic supply chain risk management is another aspect. And then last but not least, there was no technical infrastructure to facilitate the visibility and collaboration with these extended networks to drive these efforts.
So resilience certainly is the key word today in supply chain management, but help me to understand, Vijay, just what exactly are the benefits that companies can gain with a strong supply resilience capability?
Absolutely. The key benefits, once you have resilience and agility in place, is really the ability to then become a lot more proactive and beat out your competition. You can minimize lost sales and really grab significant market share compared to your competitors. 2 is you can minimize a lot of the cost impacts that we're seeing, both operating costs as well as premium logistics and freight costs. And then the third very important aspect is it'll help you enhance brand and trust. Today, the lack of ability to deliver the products to the customers on time is causing a significant impact in terms of brand image loss, as well as dip in customer satisfaction. So that you can definitely address head on. And then it also helps you build some of the structural capabilities that I just talked about around planning, sourcing, inventory management, and design.
You know, it has been suggested that many supply chains overemphasized cost and efficiency over the years, and that's why they got caught out when supplies just got disrupted during the pandemic. However, that doesn't mean that you can abandon the focus on cost and efficiency either. So what should organizations do, Vijay, to strike a balance between efficiency and risk?
I don't think organizations can any longer ignore resilience and agility capabilities in addition to efficiency. And so to strike a balance, you've got to be able to build the capabilities I talked about, both tactical and structural, and embed them into really the DNA of the organization. It starts with really 3 things, right? So to strike a balance, you've got to make sure that you have the capabilities in place. You've got to make sure that you've got the technology platform in place and you make the appropriate investments. And then you've got to make sure you've got the organization, talent, and skills in place. And the way you want to strike a balance is continue to focus on costs. And we're seeing some cost headwinds already come our way, but don't ignore the resilience and agility, because that can have significant, impacts that could sort of really affect the brand image and customer satisfaction in the longer run.
Okay, so are there actually, though, any defined measures for organizations that allow them to estimate their actual operational resilience and agility?
Yeah, we've looked into this and put a lot of thought into what the measures would be. And let me break it up into a resilience index and an agility index. When you think about a resilience index, we're thinking about a capacity buffer measured as a percent of excess capacity, inventory, and cash at each node in the ecosystem to manage supply during disruption. Examples are percent raw materials with more than one supplier, percent finished goods with more than one manufacturing plant, etc. Execution speed is number two, measured as a difference between planned and actual operational lead times. Examples, supplier lead time, manufacturing lead time, order to cash lead time, etc. Third is the supply chain visibility, measured as an availability of operational information of partners and facilities. And examples there include operational information such as facility networks, inventory, delivery performance, quality warranty recall, OEE, supplier capacity risk, and the like. When we think about agility, which is defined as an integration of available data and systems in the supply chain ecosystem, ecosystem integration is one measure. So this is enablement of the end-to-end planning through integration of systems in the ecosystem to manage a two-way sharing of information so you can proactively address risk. So this example could be a percent of tier one suppliers with two-way exchange information, percent of products fully integrated into concurrent planning, etc. Second is process integration. So this is innovation potential and vertical integration of partners in the ecosystem, leading to rapid change adoption. And this could be R&D budget as a percent of sales, percent of nodes owned by the organization, as you think about a little bit of vertical integration as well to manage risk. And then the third one is customer and market sensitivity. So this is measured as a speed and number of new product introduction with respect to customer sensitivity and trends. An example could be NPI based on customer preferences, average days of lead time between demand sensing and new product introduction, customer satisfaction score, and the like.
That's great, because agility has to be foremost in the minds of supply chain managers today, just because things are changing so fast. And that is a bitter lesson that supply chain managers have learned over the last 3 years. No matter how resilient you seem to be, you definitely have to be able to pivot with the real when you hit against the real world. Okay, so we've agreed, have we not, that digitization is a journey, not a destination.
Yep.
But that being the case, what is the appropriate level of digital maturity that is required to embark on this journey of building resilience and agility in supply chains?
Yeah, we looked at a number of companies, and I would say from a digital maturity standpoint, companies are just scratching the surface. I think at this point, I want to say there are possibly 3 levels of digital maturity, let's call it that. The first one is just being able to sense the risks and get all these alerts and at least know what disruption we're seeing there. A recent example being the earthquake in Turkey. So that's one. Do I at least know what is happening out there as I look across the globe in terms of supplier or event-related risks? The second aspect of digital maturity is then being able to figure out very quickly, what does that risk mean to me? And that really comes from intelligence that is captured in terms of the supply network. It is the intelligence that is captured in terms of quickly triaging the supply network intelligence along with the risk to say, what is the impact to my customers' plans, suppliers, etc. And then the third aspect there would be, continuously looking at collaborating with the suppliers on a digital platform to mitigate that risk. And then the third level of digital maturity, which is extremely mature organizations, that have created APIs between the risk management technology platform, if you will, with planning systems and ERP systems and supplier systems, so that they get immediate intimation of supply demand mismatches and quickly can resort to their planning and ERP systems to make adjustments very real time. So that's what I would call is sort of the 3 levels of digital maturity, and companies are probably at the beginning and trying to move towards the highest level of maturity.
Thank you. Okay, so when it comes to N-tier visibility, how do the companies that you consulted with, how do they prioritize which vendors to map N-tier?
Great question. I will say the first thing, if companies are doing a great job of scoring these suppliers on multiple dimensions, and what I've seen is quality, cost, logistics, management, finances are kind of a set of metrics that are used to measure supplier performance. So take the internal data, take the externally available data that continuously monitors risks of suppliers that typically are tier ones to a lot of these companies, but then also use the supply network intelligence to understand sub-tier choke points and start monitoring them. And so I think a combination of these 3 aspects and prioritizing, therefore, the commodity supplier combinations provides you a list of priorities. Then you go sense risks for all those suppliers continuously. That way, you can then real time figure out collaboratively how you mitigate those risks.
Thank you. Which are the technological advancements that have been used to mitigate risk proactively? And I think the emphasis here is on proactively to improve supply chain resilience.
So I will say there are 2 things that are going on that I'm seeing as capabilities being matured across organizations and especially leaders. One is just the pure ability to take an understanding of your supply network and where the choke points are, bringing those suppliers onto a collaborative platform, and then just sharing forecast information that is blown or exploded down to that sub-tier level, and understanding the supplier commits and seeing proactively if there is any mismatches, and then bringing them and saying, okay, let's open up a case and let's figure out how to resolve this risk. That's number 1. And then the second piece is really making it a little bit more real time, where operational visibility is shared by the sub-tier supplier and the choke points in terms of capacity that is available in the longer term, in terms of week by week visibility, maybe 6 months or a year down of the supplier commits at the high risk supplier choke points versus the forecast of the company, and then looking at mismatches real time and then addressing them. That's how proactiveness is being driven, Bob.
Great, great. This questioner says, I have a budget of $200,000 to invest this year to address improvement of intelligence about N-tier suppliers. What is your recommendation for the best use of that limited budget for positive impact?
Great question again, and we are trying to help companies think through where they need to invest first. In my mind, I think you first need to figure out, if you can, what is the top 10, 15 suppliers that are your biggest pain points based on history. Number 2, marry that with external intelligence that companies like we are bringing in terms of what it is that we see as potential supplier risks. And then, triage that with events where you can geofence a particular natural disaster or a geopolitical event, and then analyze very quickly what is the impact of a particular risk to that particular company. I think you need to just enable that core capability. That way, at least you can start becoming a lot more responsive, if not proactive, as a first step. That's how I would invest the $200,000.
And a couple of other questions that are sort of related to that. This questioner says, this seems complicated for a smaller organization. Well, I would think that this could be intimidating to any organization, large or small, if they just have to get underway. The questioner says, what are the first critical pieces? And another questioner says, where should they start? Kind of the same question. So what is step one, Vijay? How do they start to get their feet wet on this and move into this process?
It's very similar to the question I just answered, but I do understand that this can be overwhelming, right? Because again, as I said, it is a journey. Companies are doing this over the last couple of years and are continuing to mature. And as I said, they're probably, if you remember the digital maturity I talked about, probably scratching the surface of the second level. So what should companies do to get started? I think, again, look within, understand what you know of risks that your supply base causes you based on history, marry that with some supplier intelligence that can be gleaned externally, and then start looking at alerts that come through daily. This is now available real time to you. And quickly conduct the triage analytics that says, if there's a risk, does it affect my supply base? And therefore, does it affect my most profitable products, plans, and customers? And that way you can hone in your supply risk efforts as a first step to where it matters most. Then you can think about building a roadmap and slowly maturing an organization to the rest of the capabilities I described.
Okay, Vijay, we were all waiting for this question. What role will artificial intelligence play in the near and medium term in this space?
Huge. It's huge. What I'll say is the extent of digital exhaust that is out there is immense. What we've done is, as a company, have taken bills of lading and supplier buy-sell relationships, hundreds and thousands of data that is available to us through various data sources. We've compiled it. And now what we're trying to do is cull through the information, take out things that are not relevant. And as we train the tool, we are employing artificial intelligence and machine learning to then quickly recognize more supplier networks that we analyze. The risks that we analyze are quickly classified into different risk categories that I just described in my presentation. And so artificial intelligence is helping, and machine learning is really helping drive those efforts and accelerating the digital exhaust to what is really usable and pertinent to companies. So it's going to play a huge role as we go forward.
Great. How do you measure the impact of internal and external risks in financial terms, in currency, in value? Big question there.
Yeah, the question about quantifying the risk is a very important aspect to risk prioritization. So you talked about internal and external risks. I think internal risks are, for the most part, born through known supplier risks and prioritization that companies have done internally, and really then tracking what kind of spend exposure you have to certain suppliers, how critical are they to some of your key products in your portfolio. And so zeroing in on those particular suppliers and quantifying, in case of a risk, who's likely to cause the biggest impact, and then starting to monitor them and collaborating with them and exchanging information with them is going to be important. And then external risks are really all about, geopolitical or natural hazards and the like. Very quickly being able to geofence it, understanding your multi-tier supply network and seeing if they are impacted very quickly and triaging the impact to your portfolio and customers. And so you got to really put those two things together to drive risk agility, risk resilience and agility.
I think this next questioner is recognizing the fact that this is indeed a two-way street. asks about suppliers' willingness to contribute with OEMs, sharing information like inventory, bill of material details, cost drivers, et cetera. What about that flow of information with the suppliers? What are the key leverages that you can have with suppliers in order to ensure that that information is flowing from them and you can make use of it?
This is a significant challenge, I must admit. And most of the commercial relationships today exist between a OEM, let's say, and a tier one supplier. And so when you look into the sub tiers, those relationships between the OEMs and the sub tiers don't exist. So how do we overcome, number one, not only getting visibility into tier ones that many are struggling with, but into sub tiers as well is a great question. So to me, that all comes with understanding where your risks are and treating not only the tier one, but the sub tiers that are choke points and risk points as a collaborative partner, all the way from your sharing your portfolio plan, sharing your technology cycle plan that I talked about in terms of the structural capabilities, designing and co-developing with them in mind, and then ultimately driving planning and driving sourcing agreements first that guarantee them take or pay or long-term service agreements, not only with the tier ones, again, with the sub tiers as well, which is beginning to happen today. And then ultimately driving some planning that allows more stable demand to be shared with the tier ones and the sub tiers directly. These kinds of cross-functional interconnected strategies are really helping drive that communication.
So we talked about the need for balance, but let's answer this questioner's question about, even once you've achieved that balance, how do you sell it? They're saying, how do you sell the need to invest in resilience internally versus the cost pressures that are typically seen within the supply chain? And I think they're probably talking about selling it to the C-suite maybe, but what's your take on that, Vijay?
Yeah, in that regard, what we're helping companies think through is what is the impact of what is the impact that they've seen in terms of lost revenue, expedited costs, customer brand challenges, sourcing challenges, etc. Right? So again, it boils down to prioritization. You can't go after everything, and then helping the C-suite understand the exposure that they have, let's say, to a set of suppliers and set of recent events that have created a significant impact to the elements that I just listed. And then being able to quantify, if you don't have resilience or agility capabilities in place, what kind of a damage it could cause to the company. I think that's how we're helping companies sell it to the C-suite.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we are just about out of time. I think we have time for maybe one final question. So Vijay, here it is. In summary, what should organizations do to build resilience in their supply chains?
Bob, I'm going to go back and share what I'd said before. Activate, automate, and embed a comprehensive set of capabilities enabled by requisite organization, talent, and skills. So let's go over that once more. And I want to make sure the audience understands this integrated supply chain resilience comes from activation, which is triaging network intelligence in the sub-tiers with risk sensing to quickly analyze the risk impact and creating a portfolio so that you can deploy your resources efficiently and effectively. Number two, automate. Employ a technology platform to move from being reactive to proactive risk mitigation. And this is driven by AI, ML, and predictive risk capabilities, real-time sensing and prioritization so that you can create a risk portfolio and a control tower to continuously prioritize your risk mitigation efforts, and then integrating that with your ERP and planning and supplier systems so that you can get operational visibility and become a lot more proactive as you go along. And then the third piece is embedding organization, talent, skills, and structural and tactical capabilities that enable this, which really starts with ensuring you have an organization focused on risk that is closely connected to your procurement and the other cross-functional players like design and development, as well as planning. Think about a crisis management team, again, that is cross-functional, that has the category expertise and the ability to drive risk mitigation cases from identification to resolution. And the key point there I want to make is that when you do that, you build a lot of learning in the organization that then compresses the time from identification to resolution as you go forward, and then just building the structural capabilities around design, sourcing, and planning that I've already shared.
Well, Vijay, you certainly made it clear that this is a journey that companies must make. Thank you for helping us understand what they have to pack for the journey. Really appreciate your insights, Vijay Natarajan. Audience, thank you so much for your lively participation, your great questions, for listening in on this. I do want to let our audience know about the next episode in this 6-episode series on creating resilient supply chains through IT innovation. It's called Strategic Supplier Management: The Balance Between Breadth and Depth, and it will be on April 20th, 2023 at 2 p.m. Eastern. There's a URL that you can snap a quick picture of if you want, but that will also be sent to you in an email. So if you don't have that capability and certainly don't want to try to copy it down that quickly, there it is. But again, thanks very much, Vijay Natarajan. Thanks, everybody. And all of you have just a great day.
Thank you.